Hello, YouTube. I realize that I'm late on this, but I did want to comment briefly on Charlie Veitch's recent change of opinion with regard to his 9/11 beliefs. I don't know whether I really should be commenting on this. I don't know that it's necessarily productive, but I'm going to do so anyway because I feel like talking to my camera. I feel like talking to an inanimate object because that's productive and positive and fosters community and humanness. I'm obviously being sarcastic in that regard, but I felt like talking to my camera, making a YouTube video, and it's on a potentially unproductive topic, but I do want to share my thoughts in case they could potentially be beneficial. So, as you may or may not know, prominent UK activist Charlie Veitch, who goes around on his megaphone attempting to awaken the masses, has recently changed his mind with regard to 9/11. He now more or less endorses the official story. He leans strongly towards the official story at the very least. This is a guy who's highly anti-establishment, who's an anarchist, opposes all hierarchy, and has a lot of rage with regard to the inhumanity present in society, as perpetrated predominantly by politicians and corporations. And here he is, all of a sudden, endorsing more or less the official story with regard to 9/11. He was in America filming for a BBC-affiliated television program for approximately 1 week. And during this trip, he met with quote-unquote experts, or perhaps, experts in their field, who convinced him, according to Charlie Veitch, that the official story was accurate, or at least that the quote-unquote conspiracy theories were not valid. Now, my initial reaction was one of relative surprise, was one of surprise, genuine surprise. The fact that this prominent, angry, highly anti-establishment individual would, in the span of 2 days, upon meeting with a few experts and upon meeting with some family members, more or less endorse the official story. Honestly, I may be stating this somewhat inaccurately because I have not watched the interviews that Charlie Veitch has done on this topic with other prominent activists, etc. I just have watched his videos. I watched the first few minutes of one of the interviews he did, but I don't know honestly precisely to what extent he endorses the official story. I know that he is now rather hostile, or at least considerably hostile, to the quote-unquote conspiracy theories, the alternative 9/11 theories. I do not know if he fully endorses the official story or just leans very strongly towards it. So having said that, my initial view was one of quite surprise. This highly anti-establishment individual meeting with experts and family members and changing his mind over the span of a week or so. So then I began to think of potential reasons for this, and the fact of the matter is that we will never know, and it's essentially pointless to continue speculating. There are those that say, right off the bat, Charlie is MI-6, he's a New World Order, CIA, MI-6, Mossad operative. It doesn't even make sense. Some people are so irrational, they just string a bunch of labels that they view have a negative connotation together, and they just say, oh, this is what Charlie Veitch is. They don't even meet the bare minimum in terms of rational thought, in terms of what qualifies as rational thought, or even, I would argue, what qualifies as genuine thought, period. I mean, clearly, their mind is working to some extent, they're thinking to some extent, but, these people are just, oh, he changed his mind on 9/11, he's a BBC, NWO, MI-6, Mossad, CIA, MI-5 XYZ operative. Like, they don't even, it doesn't even make sense. Like, is he simultaneously working for the BBC and Mossad and the CIA and MI6? I mean, and people call him a sellout shill. Well, did he sell out to the BBC, or is he a shill for the government, or is he a shill for BBC? It doesn't even cohere rationally. But in any case, so there are multiple possibilities, and we'll never know the truth. One, he genuinely changed his mind because maybe he's a fairly impressionable individual, or he was impacted emotionally by meeting with some of the family members in New York City recently and genuinely changed his mind. Possibility 2. He was bribed by the BBC to pretend he changed his mind. He was financially bribed by the BBC. Possibility 3. He was threatened by a government or intelligence agency of one sort or another, presumably the UK, presumably one within the UK. Possibility 4 is kind of a combination. He was, the BBC attempted to genuinely convince him by taking him on this trip in the U.S. where he met with experts, etc. And, the BBC perhaps had a nefarious intent in setting up these meetings with these experts and convincing him, but nevertheless, it was a genuine change of mind as a consequence of these meetings that this organization filming for the BBC documentary that will air in September on the anniversary of 9/11. It's a demonization attempt, as part of that effort. There are a few other possibilities as well. Can't think of them offhand. But in essence, either he genuinely changed his mind, is compromised to one extent or another, or was influenced by ill intent in individuals and organizations with ill intent, but also genuinely changed his mind. So, the approach we should take to this, if we're to be critical thinkers, if we're going to be rational individuals, not even to be critical thinkers, but just to think at a reasonably rational level, is to just admit the fact that we don't know. We don't know what occurred. We don't know what occurred. We don't know what occurred. We can speculate, but we can't know. In order to know something with certainty, you need evidence. We don't have evidence here. We do have the fact that he was highly anti-establishment and critical of the government, and then rather suddenly changed his view, but, that perhaps raises suspicion, but it doesn't come anywhere near conclusively demonstrating that he was compromised. For those of you who say Charlie Veitch is a shill, Charlie Veitch is working for the New World Order now, etc., etc., you're so certain of this with no evidence. It just does not make sense to me. It should not make sense to anyone capable of the elementary degree of rational thinking. Now, I will say that I found Charlie Veitch's criticisms subsequent to his change of mind, his criticisms of the 9/11 Truth Movement, I found them to be excessively harsh. Because, I don't know, I found them to be excessively harsh, to some extent, but I also felt that they had validity. He comments on the fact that the 9/11 Truth Movement is somewhat of a cult, or that they are a cult in essence, that they act in a cult-like fashion, that they routinely think dogmatically, they are rather hostile to someone for changing their mind, they accuse the individual of being a government operative simply for changing their mind, and I agree with that statement in large part. I agree that the 9/11 Truth Movement there is a relatively significant segment that does hurl around these accusations, and when Charlie Veitch changed his mind, they typed all sorts of vile, hateful comments on his channel and sent him vile messages, etc. And that's absolutely unreasonable and unwarranted in my view. So there is that component, but I think that when you call the 9/11 Truth Movement in its entirety a cult, you ignore the reasonably decent percentage of individuals within that so-called movement that are highly rational, or that at least offer rational analyses as it pertains to the 9/11 events. That includes David Ray Griffin, that includes Richard Gage, that includes Graham McQueen, that includes David Chandler, that includes Stephen Jones, that includes, various other individuals, less prominent as well as equally prominent, who deal exclusively with the science or deal with, or have a reasoned analysis, who don't simply call anyone who disagrees MI-5, CIA, Mossad operatives, who don't simply accuse anyone who asks for money for being a shill and a sellout, of being a shill and a sellout, etc. So, and first of all, you should be, if you're going to paint the 9/11 Truth Movement as cult-like, you should define what segment of the 9/11 Truth Movement you're referring to. I can say that the very minuscule segment of the 9/11 Truth Movement that promotes the energy-directed nuclear weapons theories, that promotes the no planes theories, etc., that promotes the TV fakery hologram theories, that promotes the Jew theories, that Jewish people were responsible, or it was a Jewish conspiracy, that promotes the alien theories about 9/11, etc. I can identify that fringe segment of the 9/11 Truth Movement and say these individuals are highly irrational, they're highly incapable of critical thought, they are often bigoted, etc., etc. But, and then I can also say that there's a wider segment of the 9/11 Truth Movement that doesn't believe those absurd theories, but still engages in highly irrational thought, such as the aforementioned, accusing anyone who disagrees of being an MI-6 operative, etc. But I think that should be defined. We shouldn't make blanket statements about the entirety of a movement that is not really even, in fact, a movement. There are a variety of individuals with different beliefs, as other YouTube users and others have stated, and so we should define those that we're calling irrational and cult-like before we just call the quote-unquote 9/11 Truth Movement in its entirety irrational and cult-like. Or even if we don't say in its entirety, but we simply say the movement, because then you're not specifying, you're painting too broad a stroke, you're generalizing to too great an extent, in my view. And then there's also the fact that, there are so many irrational people in our society, there's so many people incapable of critical thought, there's so many people that are, excessively, accusatory, etc., that, yes, you could argue that it's manifests in an extremely and unusually detrimental and anti-intellectual fashion in certain fringe and in certain decently large segments of the 9/11 Truth Movement, so-called. But the fact of the matter is that in virtually every movement, in virtually every in the people that adhere to virtually any political belief, you're going to find considerable percentages that engage in irrational thought, even in the realm of very rational views, even in the realm of those who oppose the occupation of Iraq, as well as those who recognize that the official version of 9/11 is a fraud. You're going to get the individuals who are irrational. So I don't, certainly it's you get the irrational individuals to different extents in different movements, but the notion that it's somehow like exclusive or manifests in a far more extensive fashion in the 9/11 Truth Movement is, I think, inaccurate, and it should be acknowledged that there are considerable percentages of irrational individuals in a variety of that subscribe to a variety of belief sets, and that there are a considerable amount of rational individuals in the 9/11 Truth so-called movement. So that's my spiel on Charlie Veitch. We don't know what happened. We can speculate, but I think it's Those who form conclusions without evidence are not thinking critically or not even thinking rationally. That's all the time I have, YouTube. Thanks for listening.